The carriage rattled through the iron gates of Ashford Manor on a bitter November morning in 1868, carrying with it a woman who had nothing left to lose. Miss Eleanor Hartley pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, watching the imposing Gothic structure emerge from the mist like a fortress built to keep the world at bay. She had come to tame wild children, they said. But as the great oak doors swung open to reveal a man standing in the shadows, tall, scarred, and radiating a grief so profound it seemed to darken the very air around him, Eleanor realized she had walked into something far more dangerous than unruly offspring. The Duke of Ashford's eyes met hers for a single searing moment, and in that instant she understood. This house held secrets that could destroy her or save them all. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. Eleanor Hartley had always known her life would be one of service. Born the youngest daughter of a country vicar in Derbyshire, she had been raised on modest means, good books, and the understanding that her intelligence, while considerable, would never be her ticket to security. That distinction belonged to beauty and fortune, neither of which she possessed in abundance. At 24, she was considered past the bloom of youth by society's cruel standards, though her clear grey eyes and the determined set of her jaw suggested a woman who had made peace with her circumstances. She had spent the past 6 years as a governess in respectable households, teaching young ladies their French verbs and watercolor techniques, always maintaining the invisible line between servant and family. It was a lonely existence, belonging nowhere, but it was honest work. When her previous employer, Mrs. Pemberton of Bath, had passed away suddenly, Eleanor found herself adrift once more, scanning the advertisements in the Times for her next position. The advertisement for Ashford Manor had been unusual. Governess required for 2 children, ages 8 and 10, must possess exceptional patience, firm discipline, and an unshakable constitution. Previous governesses need not apply. Generous salary. Inquire with Mrs. Dawson, housekeeper, Ashford Manor, Yorkshire. The warning about previous governesses should have given her pause, but the salary offered was nearly double what she had earned before. Desperation, Eleanor had learned, made one remarkably brave. The journey north had taken 2 days, and with each mile, the landscape had grown wilder, the villages smaller, the sky greyer. Yorkshire in November was a study in bleakness, all windswept moors and skeletal trees. When the hired coach finally deposited her at the village of Ashford-on-the-Moor, the innkeeper's wife had crossed herself upon hearing Eleanor's destination. "Ashford Manor, miss. You're certain?" The woman's weathered face had creased with concern. "They've had 7 governesses in 18 months. 7! Not a one lasted more than a fortnight." Eleanor had lifted her chin. "Then perhaps I shall be the 8th who stays." Now, standing in the cavernous entrance hall of Ashford Manor, Eleanor wondered if pride had led her astray. The house was magnificent in its Gothic grandeur, vaulted ceilings, dark wood panelling, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors staring down from the walls. But there was something oppressive about it, as if the very stones were weighted with sorrow. The air smelled of beeswax and something else, something indefinable. Neglect, perhaps, or grief. Mrs. Dawson, the housekeeper, was a woman of perhaps 50, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that assessed Eleanor with the precision of a military general. "You're younger than I expected," she said without preamble, "and smaller. The children are formidable." "I have managed formidable children before, Mrs. Dawson. Not like these, I'll wager." The housekeeper's expression softened slightly. "But you've kind eyes. That may count for something. Come, I'll show you to your room. His Grace is away on estate business, but he'll want to meet you at dinner." Eleanor's room was in the east wing, a modest but comfortable chamber with a view of the gardens, or what had once been gardens. Now they were overgrown, wild roses strangling the trellises, paths disappearing beneath weeds. It seemed the house's neglect extended beyond its walls. She had barely unpacked her few belongings when a crash echoed from somewhere below, followed by shouting. Eleanor hurried downstairs, following the commotion to what appeared to be the morning room. There she found her charges. Master Thomas Ashford, aged 10, stood atop a Louis Sephifin's settee, brandishing a wooden sword and wearing what appeared to be a tablecloth as a cape. His sister, Lady Catherine, called Kit by the servants Eleanor would learn, was 8 years old and currently attempting to tie the footman to a chair with what looked like expensive drapery cord. "Pirates!" Thomas shouted, catching sight of Eleanor. "We're pirates and you're our prisoner!" Eleanor took in the scene with remarkable calm. The footman, a young man named James, looked mortified. A Chinese vase lay shattered on the floor. The children themselves were beautiful. Thomas with his father's dark hair and strong features, Kit with golden curls and eyes like summer sky, but they radiated a wildness that spoke of profound unhappiness. "Pirates," Eleanor said thoughtfully, stepping into the room. "How interesting. I was once captured by pirates myself." This gave them pause. Thomas lowered his sword slightly. "You were not." "I most certainly was. Off the coast of Cornwall. Terrible business. They made me walk the plank." Kit's eyes widened. "Did you drown?" "Obviously not, as I'm standing here. I made them a bargain instead." Eleanor moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I told them I knew where treasure was hidden, but I would only reveal it if they made me captain of the ship." "And did they?" Thomas was fully engaged now, sword forgotten. "They did. And do you know what I did as captain?" Both children shook their heads. "I steered the ship home, where every pirate received a fair trial and a second chance at an honest life." Eleanor smiled. "Because the greatest treasure isn't gold, Master Thomas. It's knowing who you truly are beneath the costume." The room fell silent. Then slowly, Thomas climbed down from the settee. Kit released the footman, who fled gratefully. Eleanor knelt to examine the broken vase, her heart sinking at its obvious value. "Our mother liked that vase," Kit said softly. "She brought it back from London. Your mother had excellent taste. Perhaps we might collect the pieces and see if they can be mended. Some broken things can be made whole again with patience and care." She looked up to find both children staring at her with an intensity that was unsettling. They were testing her, she realized. Every governess before her had likely scolded, punished, or fled. Eleanor was offering something different, understanding. "Will you really stay?" Thomas asked. And beneath the bravado, she heard the question he was truly asking. "Will you leave us too?" "I intend to try," Eleanor said honestly, "if you'll have me." The afternoon passed in a tentative truce. Eleanor learned that the children's mother, the Duchess of Ashford, had died 2 years prior in a riding accident. Their father, the Duke, had retreated into his grief and his work, leaving the children to run wild under the care of a succession of governesses who couldn't manage them. The household staff walked on eggshells. The house itself seemed to be holding its breath. And the children, these beautiful wounded children, were crying out for attention in the only way they knew how. By evening, Eleanor had established a temporary peace. She had read to them from Robinson Crusoe, played a game of chess with Thomas, who was surprisingly skilled, and helped Kit tend to a family of hedgehogs she was secretly keeping in a box in the garden shed. They were bright, creative children, starving for structure and affection. Mrs. Dawson appeared at 6 o'clock. "His Grace has returned. He'll see you in his study before dinner, Miss Hartley." Eleanor's stomach tightened with nerves. She changed into her best dress, a simple grey wool that had seen better days, and made her way to the study in the west wing. She knocked, heard a curt "enter," and stepped inside. The Duke of Ashford stood with his back to her, staring out the window at the darkening moors. He was tall, perhaps 35, with broad shoulders and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. When he turned, Eleanor's breath caught. He was devastatingly handsome, but it was a beauty marked by suffering. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against his tanned skin, a souvenir from the same riding accident that had killed his wife, she would later learn. But it was his eyes that arrested her, dark, intelligent, and filled with such profound pain that Eleanor felt it like a physical blow. Miss Hartley. His voice was deep, cultured, and utterly devoid of warmth. Mrs. Dawson tells me you survived your first day. That alone makes you exceptional. Your children are not monsters, Your Grace. They're grieving. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or anger. You've been here 6 hours and presume to understand my children. I presume to understand grief, Your Grace. I lost my own mother when I was Kit's age. The pain makes you want to break things, to see if the world will finally pay attention. The Duke was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made Eleanor's cheeks warm. Finally, he spoke. You'll find I'm not an easy man to work for, Miss Hartley. I have expectations. The children will have proper lessons, proper discipline, proper comportment. They are an Ashford, and they will behave as such. They're children first, Your Grace. Perhaps if they're allowed to be children, truly be children, with guidance and affection, the proper behavior will follow naturally. Affection. He said the word as if it were foreign. I implore you to educate them, not coddle them. With respect, Your Grace, education without compassion is merely training. Your children need more than a trainer. The Duke's jaw tightened, and for a moment Eleanor thought she had gone too far, that she would be dismissed before she'd even properly begun. But then, unexpectedly, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Hartley. I haven't decided which. He turned back to the window. You'll dine in the nursery with the children. That will be all. Eleanor was dismissed. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Miss Hartley, the vase they broke today was a wedding gift from my wife's mother. It was precious to her. Eleanor's heart ached at the carefully controlled emotion in his voice. I've collected all the pieces, Your Grace. I know an excellent craftsman in the village who specializes in restoration. If you'll permit me, I'll take it to him tomorrow. Some broken things can be mended. She didn't wait for his response, but as she closed the door, she could have sworn she heard him whisper, "Can they?" That night, lying in her narrow bed, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and wondered what she had gotten herself into. This was no ordinary household, and the Duke of Ashford was no ordinary employer. He was a man trapped in his own fortress of grief, and his children were paying the price. But Eleanor Hartley had never been one to shy from a challenge. She had come to Ashford Manor to be a governess, but perhaps, just perhaps, she was meant to do something more. Perhaps she was meant to help heal a broken family, to bring light back into this house of shadows. She fell asleep thinking of the Duke's scarred face and wounded eyes, unaware that her arrival had set in motion a transformation that would change all their lives forever. The first weeks at Ashford Manor passed in a careful dance of progress and setbacks. Eleanor established routines, morning lessons in mathematics and literature, afternoon walks for natural science, evenings for music and art. Thomas proved to have a keen mind for strategy and history, while Kit possessed an artist's eye and a naturalist's curiosity. Slowly, tentatively, they began to trust her. The Duke, however, remained a distant figure. Eleanor saw him only at their weekly progress meetings, brief encounters in his study where he listened to her reports with polite detachment, asked perfunctory questions, and dismissed her with barely concealed disinterest. He was a ghost in his own home, rising before dawn to manage the estate, taking meals in his study, retiring late to his chambers. The children spoke of him with a mixture of longing and resentment, as if he were a stranger they once knew. "Father used to play with us," Kit confided one afternoon as they sketched winter birds in the garden. "Before Mamma died, he taught Thomas to fence and took me riding. He laughed then. I can barely remember what it sounded like." Eleanor's heart broke for them all. for the children who had lost both parents in different ways, and for the Duke, so consumed by grief that he couldn't see his children drowning in their own. It was Mrs. Dawson who told Eleanor about the Christmas ball. The housekeeper appeared in the schoolroom one December morning, her expression grave. "His Grace is hosting the annual ball this year," she announced. "First time since the Duchess passed. The county families expect it. It's tradition. He's doing it for appearances, for the children's sake, he says. They need to maintain their social standing." Eleanor felt a flutter of unease. Will the children attend? They'll make an appearance, properly dressed and behaved. His Grace is most insistent on that point. It's to be their reintroduction to society. Mrs. Dawson's eyes held a warning. Everything must be perfect, Miss Hartley. Everything. The pressure transformed the household. Servants scrubbed and polished until the manor gleamed. The ballroom, closed since the Duchess's death, was opened and aired, its chandeliers cleaned until they sparkled like diamonds. Invitations were sent to every notable family within 50 miles. The Duke himself seemed to come alive with purpose, though Eleanor noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand would unconsciously touch his scarred face when he thought no one was watching. Eleanor threw herself into preparing the children. She taught them the proper dances, the correct forms of address, how to make polite conversation. Thomas chafed at the restrictions, but Kit seemed to blossom under the attention, twirling in the schoolroom in an imaginary ball gown. "Will you dance at the ball, Miss Hartley?" Kit asked one evening. "Governesses don't dance at balls, sweetheart. I'll be watching over you from the side." "That seems terribly unfair. You're much prettier than half the ladies who'll be there." Eleanor laughed, touched by the child's loyalty. "You're kind, but there are rules about these things. I'm staff, not family." What Eleanor didn't anticipate was how the ball would force her into proximity with the Duke. 3 days before the event, he summoned her to the ballroom to observe the children's dancing. Eleanor stood beside him as Thomas and Kit practiced a simple quadrille, acutely aware of his presence, the scent of sandalwood and leather, the controlled power in his stillness. "They've improved remarkably," he said, and Eleanor detected something new in his voice, genuine warmth. "You've worked wonders, Miss Hartley. They're wonderful children, Your Grace. They only needed someone to believe in them." He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and Eleanor felt the full force of his attention like a physical touch. "You speak of them with such affection. Most governesses maintain professional distance. I'm not most governesses." "No," he said softly, "you're not." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Eleanor couldn't name. Then Kit stumbled, and the spell broke. The Duke stepped forward to steady his daughter, and Eleanor saw something that made her breath catch. The ghost of a smile on his face, the gentle way he tucked a curl behind Kit's ear. The father was still there, buried beneath the grief. He just needed permission to emerge. The night of the ball arrived with fresh snow and bitter cold. The manor blazed with light, carriages arriving in a steady stream, depositing Yorkshire's finest families in their silks and jewels. Eleanor dressed the children with care. Thomas in a miniature evening suit that made him look heartbreakingly grown up. Kit in a white dress with blue ribbons that matched her eyes. "You look like a princess," Eleanor told her, and Kit beamed. "I wish you could wear a pretty dress too, Miss Hartley. I'm perfectly content as I am." Eleanor smoothed her serviceable black dress, the uniform of her station. "Tonight is your night to shine." The ballroom was magnificent, transformed into a winter wonderland with evergreen boughs and white roses. The county families had turned out in force. The Thorntons, the Ashworths, the Blackwoods, all the old Yorkshire names. Eleanor recognized the social dynamics immediately. The matrons assessing the Duke as potential husband material for their daughters, the younger ladies preening and positioning themselves for his attention, the gentlemen discussing politics and hunting. And there, at the centre of it all, stood the Duke of Ashford. He wore formal black evening dress that emphasized his height and bearing, his dark hair swept back, his scarred face somehow making him more compelling rather than less. He moved through the crowd with aristocratic grace, accepting condolences about his late wife with stoic dignity, deflecting matrimonial hints with practiced ease. Eleanor kept to the shadows with the children, watching. Thomas was stiff with nerves, Kit practically vibrating with excitement. When the Duke finally came to collect them for their formal introduction, Eleanor saw the pride in his eyes. "Remember what Miss Hartley taught you," he murmured to them. "Make your mother proud." He led them into the center of the ballroom, and the orchestra fell silent. All eyes turned to the Duke and his children, the tragic widower and his orphaned offspring, objects of pity and fascination. "My lords, ladies and gentlemen," the Duke's voice rang out clear and strong, "thank you for joining us this evening. It has been too long since Ashford Manor opened its doors in celebration. My children, Thomas and Catherine, wish to welcome you back to their home." Thomas bowed perfectly. Kit curtsied with grace. The crowd applauded, and Eleanor felt a surge of pride. They had done it. They were going to be fine. Then Lady Thornton stepped forward. Eleanor had heard of her, the most influential matron in the county, arbiter of social standing, and mother to 3 unmarried daughters. She was a handsome woman in her 50s, dressed in burgundy silk, with calculating eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Your Grace, how delightful to see the children looking so well," Lady Thornton said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Though I must say, I'm surprised to see them here at all, given the circumstances." The Duke's expression remained neutral. "What circumstances would those be, Lady Thornton?" "Why, their behavior, of course. The entire county has heard about the parade of governesses, the destruction, the wildness. 7 governesses in 18 months, wasn't it? My dear Duke, surely you understand that such a reputation reflects poorly on the family, on the children's prospects." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eleanor saw Thomas's face flush with shame, Kit's eyes fill with tears. The Duke's jaw tightened. But before he could respond, Lady Thornton continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Of course, we all understand that children without a mother's guidance can go astray. It's not their fault, poor dears. But one must think of their future. What respectable family would align themselves with such troubled children? Thomas will need to make an advantageous match someday, and as for little Catherine—" She shook her head sadly. "Well, a girl's reputation is everything, isn't it?" The ballroom had gone deathly quiet. Eleanor watched in horror as Kit's face crumpled, as Thomas stood rigid with humiliation. The Duke looked as if he'd been struck, his scarred face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. Then Lady Thornton delivered her final blow. "Perhaps, Your Grace, it would be best if the children retired for the evening. Let the adults enjoy the festivities. After all, we wouldn't want any incidents to mar such a lovely occasion." It was a public dismissal, a social execution. Eleanor saw the Duke's internal struggle, his desire to defend his children warring with his ingrained sense of propriety, his fear that perhaps Lady Thornton was right, that his children were damaged beyond repair. And in that moment of his hesitation, Eleanor saw something break in Thomas's eyes. The boy turned and fled the ballroom, Kit sobbing as she ran after him. The crowd watched with a mixture of pity and satisfaction, their worst assumptions confirmed. The Duke stood frozen, his face a mask of anguish. Lady Thornton smiled triumphantly, already turning to her daughters. "Now then, shall we have some proper dancing? Your Grace, I believe my eldest, Arabella, would be delighted to partner with you for the first waltz." Eleanor didn't think. She simply moved. She walked straight across the ballroom floor, ignoring the gasps and whispers, and stopped directly in front of Lady Thornton. "You're wrong," Eleanor said clearly, her voice carrying in the silence. "Those children are not troubled. They're grieving. There's a difference." Lady Thornton's eyes widened with outrage. "How dare you? Who are you to address me? I'm their governess, and I've spent every day for the past 2 months with Thomas and Catherine Ashford. They're intelligent, creative, kind-hearted children who lost their mother and have been trying desperately to cope with that loss. Yes, they acted out. Yes, they drove away governesses, because they were testing whether anyone would stay, whether anyone would love them enough to see past the behavior to the pain beneath. Eleanor was dimly aware of the Duke staring at her, of the entire ballroom holding its breath, but she couldn't stop. You speak of reputation and prospects, Lady Thornton, as if those are the measure of a child's worth, but I've seen Thomas spend an hour helping a stable boy learn to read. I've watched Kit nurse an injured bird back to health with such tenderness it would break your heart. These children have more genuine goodness in them than all the polished manners and social graces in this room combined. This is outrageous, Lady Thornton sputtered. Your Grace, are you going to allow your servant to speak to me this way? All eyes turned to the Duke. Eleanor suddenly realized what she'd done, overstepped every boundary, violated every rule of her position. She would be dismissed, certainly, probably without references. Her career as a governess was over, but as she looked at the Duke's face, she saw something unexpected. His dark eyes were blazing, not with anger at her, but with something else entirely. Something that looked almost like awakening. Miss Hartley is quite right, the Duke said, his voice low and dangerous. My children are not troubled, they're grieving, and I have failed them by not seeing that, by not protecting them from exactly this kind of cruelty. He turned to Lady Thornton, and Eleanor had never seen a man look more formidable. You came into my home, accepted my hospitality, and used it as an opportunity to humiliate my children in front of the entire county. You speak of reputation, madam? Let me tell you about reputation. My children's reputation will be built on their character, their kindness, their intelligence, all qualities they possess in abundance. As for your concerns about their prospects, I assure you, the Ashford name and fortune will open any door they choose to walk through. Lady Thornton had gone red, then white. Your Grace, you meant to elevate yourself by diminishing my children. You failed. I believe it's time for you and your family to leave. The gasps were audible now. To be asked to leave a ball was a social catastrophe. Lady Thornton looked around desperately for support, but found none. The other guests had the grace to look ashamed, recognizing their own complicity in the spectacle. You'll regret this, Lady Thornton hissed as she gathered her daughters. The entire county will hear of this insult. I'm counting on it, the Duke replied coldly. Let them hear that the Duke of Ashford will not tolerate anyone who hurts his children. Now get out of my house. The Thorntons departed in disgrace, and the ballroom erupted in whispers. The Duke turned to Eleanor, and she braced herself for his anger. Instead, he said quietly, Thank you, Miss Hartley. That took remarkable courage. I'm sorry, Your Grace, I shouldn't have. You should have. You did what I should have done immediately. You defended them. His voice cracked slightly. You defended my children when I stood there like a coward, paralyzed by propriety and fear. You're not a coward, Your Grace. You're a father who's been lost in grief. But I think, Eleanor met his eyes, saw the raw emotion there. I think you're finding your way back. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, and Eleanor felt something shift between them, something profound and terrifying and utterly inappropriate, given their respective stations. Then the Duke seemed to remember where they were. He turned to address the remaining guests, his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. Please enjoy the evening. I must attend to my children. He strode from the ballroom, and Eleanor hurried after him. They found Thomas and Kit in the nursery, both children huddled together on Kit's bed, tear-stained and miserable. I hate them, Thomas said fiercely when he saw his father. I hate all of them. They think we're broken. The Duke crossed the room and did something Eleanor had never seen him do. He sat on the bed and pulled both children into his arms. You're not broken, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You're hurt, and that's different. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I haven't been there for you. I've been so lost in my own pain that I forgot you were suffering too. We miss Mama. Kit sobbed against his chest. We miss her so much, and we miss you too, Papa. You went away even though you're still here. I know, darling, I know. The Duke was crying now, tears streaming down his scarred face. But I'm here now. I'm right here, and I'm not going away again, I promise. Eleanor backed toward the door, feeling like an intruder on this private moment of family healing. But the Duke's voice stopped her. Miss Hartley, please stay. You're part of this family too. And so Eleanor stayed, watching as the Duke of Ashford finally allowed himself to grieve with his children, to hold them and be held, to begin the long process of healing together. The ball continued downstairs without them, but here in the nursery something far more important was happening. Later, after the children had finally fallen asleep and the last guests had departed, Eleanor found herself alone with the Duke in the corridor outside the nursery. The house was quiet, the candles burning low. "I owe you an apology, Miss Hartley," he said softly, "and my gratitude. You've given me back my children. More than that, you've reminded me how to be their father. You never stopped being their father, Your Grace. You just forgot for a while. Grief does that. You speak from experience. My mother's death nearly destroyed my father. He retreated into his work, into his faith, and my siblings and I. We had to find our own way through the pain. I understand what it's like to lose a parent who's still living." The Duke studied her face in the candlelight, and Eleanor felt that dangerous pull again, that sense of connection that transcended the boundaries of employer and employee. "You're an extraordinary woman, Eleanor Hartley," he said, and the use of her first name sent a shiver through her. "I don't know what divine providence brought you to Ashford Manor, but I'm grateful for it. I'm just a governess, Your Grace." "No," he said firmly, "you're so much more than that, and I think we both know it." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility and impossibility in equal measure. Then the Duke stepped back, propriety reasserting itself. "Good night, Miss Hartley, and thank you for everything." Eleanor returned to her room, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Tonight had changed everything. The Duke had defended his children, had finally begun to heal. But in doing so, he had also revealed something else. A connection between them that was as undeniable as it was forbidden. She lay awake for hours, listening to the house settle around her, knowing that after tonight, nothing at Ashford Manor would ever be the same. The public humiliation had become a catalyst, burning away pretense and forcing truth into the light. But Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were still ahead. Because she had committed the most dangerous mistake a governess could make. She had begun to care for her employer as more than just an employer. And judging by the way he had looked at her tonight, the feeling might be mutual. In a house still haunted by the ghost of a beloved duchess, in a society with rigid rules about class and propriety, what possible future could there be for a grieving duke and a penniless governess? Eleanor fell asleep with that question unanswered, unaware that the Duke in his own chambers was lying awake asking himself the very same thing. The morning after the ball dawned cold and bright, the winter sun glinting off fresh snow that had fallen during the night. Eleanor woke with a sense of foreboding, certain that consequences from the previous evening's debacle would arrive with the morning post. She dressed quickly and went to check on the children, finding them still asleep, their faces peaceful in repose. Thomas had his arm protectively around Kit, and the sight made Eleanor's heart ache with tenderness. She was descending the stairs when she encountered the Duke in the entrance hall. He was dressed for riding, his greatcoat dusted with snow, his cheeks ruddy from the cold. He looked more alive than she had ever seen him, as if the emotional storm of the previous night had washed away some invisible barrier. "Miss Hartley," he said, pulling off his gloves, "I'm glad I caught you. I've been thinking about what happened last night, and I've come to a decision." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Here it was, the dismissal she had been expecting. She had overstepped, embarrassed him in front of his peers, and now she would pay the price. "Your Grace, I want to apologize again for my behavior. I had no right to speak as I did." He held up a hand, stopping her. "You had every right. More than that, You had the courage to do what I should have done, but that's not what I want to discuss. Miss Hartley, the children need a change of scenery. This house, this county, it's suffocating them. Suffocating all of us, if I'm honest. Eleanor blinked in surprise. I don't understand, Your Grace. My late wife's sister, Lady Beatrice Thornhill, lives in London. She's been writing to me for months, begging me to bring the children to visit. I've refused every invitation, but now— He paused, choosing his words carefully. Now I think it might be exactly what we need. A fresh start, away from the gossips and the memories. Lady Beatrice is a remarkable woman. Independent, intelligent, unconventional by society's standards. I think you would like her very much. You want to take the children to London? For the winter season, yes. Perhaps longer. And I want you to come with us, of course. The children need continuity. And frankly, Miss Hartley, I need someone I can trust. Someone who sees my children as they truly are. Eleanor felt a rush of relief, so profound it made her dizzy. Not dismissed, but invited to London. Given a chance to continue the work she had started, to help these children heal. I would be honored, Your Grace. Something flickered in his eyes, pleasure perhaps, or relief of his own. Excellent. We'll leave in 3 days. That should give you time to prepare the children and pack what you need. Mrs. Dawson will handle the household arrangements. He started to turn away, then stopped. Miss Hartley, last night when you defended my children, I realized something. I've been so afraid of failing them, of not being enough without their mother, that I stopped trying altogether. You reminded me that trying, even imperfectly, is better than hiding. Thank you for that. Before Eleanor could respond, he was gone, striding toward his study with renewed purpose. Eleanor stood in the entrance hall, her mind whirling. London, the Duke's sister-in-law, a fresh start. It felt like a gift and a danger all at once. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of preparation. The children were ecstatic about the trip, their excitement infectious. Thomas pored over maps of London, planning all the places he wanted to visit, the Tower, the British Museum, the Royal Observatory. Kit was more interested in the shops and parks, and the promise that Aunt Beatrice kept a house full of cats. Will there be other children in London? Kit asked as Eleanor helped her pack her favourite dolls. I imagine so. Your Aunt Beatrice moves in society circles. There will likely be parties and gatherings where you'll meet other young people. Will they be like the people at the ball? The ones who said we were troubled? Eleanor sat on the bed beside her, taking the child's small hand in hers. Some people judge without understanding, Kit, but there are also people who will see you for who you truly are. Kind, creative, and brave. Your Aunt Beatrice is one of those people, I think. And in London, you'll have a chance to show everyone that you're not defined by your grief, but by how you choose to move forward from it. Kit leaned against her shoulder. I'm glad you're coming with us, Miss Hartley. You make everything feel less scary. You make everything feel less lonely, Eleanor replied softly, kissing the top of Kit's head. On the morning of their departure, Eleanor stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by trunks and cases, watching as the Duke supervised the loading of the carriages. He had arranged for them to travel in comfort. 2 carriages, one for the family and Eleanor, another for the lady's maid, valet, and luggage. It was a far cry from the hired coach that had brought Eleanor to Yorkshire just 2 months ago. Mrs. Dawson pressed a package into Eleanor's hands. Shortbread for the journey, the housekeeper said gruffly. And Miss Hartley, thank you for bringing life back to this house, for bringing him back to us. The journey to London took 3 days, with stops at coaching inns along the way. Eleanor had never travelled in such style, and she tried not to feel overwhelmed by the luxury of it all. The private parlours at the inns, the excellent meals, the Duke's casual assumption that such comfort was simply the natural order of things. But what struck her most was the transformation in the Duke himself. Away from Ashford Manor and its ghosts, he seemed to shed years of grief. He played word games with the children during the journey, pointed out landmarks, told stories about his own childhood travels. Eleanor watched him come alive and felt her own dangerous feelings deepen with every smile, every laugh, every moment of unguarded joy. On the second evening, after the children had gone to bed at the inn, Eleanor found herself alone with the Duke in the private parlour. He was standing by the fire, a glass of brandy in his hand, staring into the flames. "May I ask you something, Miss Hartley?" he said without turning. "Of course, Your Grace." "Why did you become a governess, a woman of your intelligence and education? Surely there were other paths available to you." Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "My father is a vicar with 5 children and a modest living. There was no money for dowries, no family connections to secure advantageous marriages. My choices were to be a burden on my family, to marry whoever would have me regardless of compatibility, or to make my own way in the world. I chose independence. Do you regret it?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "It's a lonely life, belonging nowhere. Not quite a servant, not quite family, always on the outside looking in. But it's honest work, and it's mine. I answer to no one but myself and my employers." The Duke turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "You're wrong about one thing, Miss Hartley. You're not on the outside at Ashford Manor. My children love you, and I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I value you, more than I can properly express." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Eleanor knew she should excuse herself, retreat to the safety of her room, but she couldn't seem to move. "Your Grace, Sebastian," he said quietly, "when we're alone, away from the servants and society, would you call me Sebastian? Just once, I'd like to hear my name spoken without the weight of title and expectation." It was wildly inappropriate, a line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. But Eleanor found herself whispering, "Sebastian." He closed his eyes as if in pain or pleasure. "Thank you. You have no idea how long it's been since I felt like a man rather than a title, since someone saw me rather than the Duke of Ashford." "I see you," Eleanor said softly. "I see a father who loves his children, a man trying to find his way through grief, a person who's stronger than he knows." When he opened his eyes, the intensity in them made Eleanor's breath catch. "And I see you, Eleanor. Not a governess, not a servant, but a woman of remarkable courage and compassion. A woman who walked into a broken household and began to heal it through sheer force of will and kindness." They stood there, the fire crackling between them, the rest of the inn quiet around them. Eleanor knew that something was shifting, that they were teetering on the edge of something that could destroy them both. A duke and a governess. It was impossible, forbidden, a scandal waiting to happen. "I should retire," Eleanor said, though she didn't move. "It's late and we have another long day of travel tomorrow." "Yes," Sebastian agreed, but he didn't move either. "Eleanor, I need you to know, whatever happens in London, whatever society says or thinks, you have my protection, my respect. You're not just an employee to me, you're important. You're important to me too," Eleanor whispered. And then, before she could lose her courage, she fled to her room. She lay awake for hours, her heart racing, replaying every word, every look. She was falling in love with the Duke of Ashford, with Sebastian, and it was the most foolish, dangerous thing she had ever done. They arrived in London on a grey afternoon, the city sprawling and chaotic after the quiet of Yorkshire. Lady Beatrice Thornhill's townhouse was in Mayfair, an elegant Georgian building with black railings and window boxes that would bloom with flowers in spring. Lady Beatrice herself was waiting on the steps, and Eleanor liked her immediately. She was perhaps 40, with auburn hair going silver at the temples, intelligent green eyes, and a warm smile that reached those eyes. She wore a fashionable but practical dress in deep blue, and when she embraced the Duke, there was genuine affection in the gesture. "Sebastian, finally! I'd almost given up hope of seeing you again." She turned to the children, kneeling despite her fine dress. "And you must be Thomas and Kit. My goodness, you've grown. I haven't seen you since you were tiny things. Come here and let me look at you properly." The children, usually shy with strangers, responded to her warmth immediately. Kit threw her arms around her aunt's neck, and Thomas managed a genuine smile. Then Lady Beatrice's eyes fell on Eleanor. "And you must be the famous Miss Hartley. Sebastian's letters have been full of your praises." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "Your ladyship is too kind." "Not at all. Any woman who can manage my nephew and niece and get my stubborn brother-in-law out of that gloomy manor deserves a medal. Come inside, all of you. I've had rooms prepared, and cook has made enough food to feed an army." The townhouse was beautiful, smaller than Ashford Manor, but filled with light and colour. Books lined the walls, paintings hung in cheerful profusion. And yes, there were cats, 3 of them, lounging on various pieces of furniture with feline entitlement. Lady Beatrice showed Eleanor to her room personally, a charming space on the 3rd floor with a view of the square. "I hope you'll be comfortable here, Miss Hartley, and please call me Beatrice when we're private. I can't abide formality in my own home." "That's very kind, but I'm not sure it's appropriate." "Appropriate." Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "I stopped caring about appropriate when my husband died and left me a wealthy widow at 35. Society expected me to retire to the country and fade away. Instead, I stayed in London, invested my money wisely, and built a life on my own terms. I host salons for artists and intellectuals. I support women's education, and I refuse to apologize for any of it." Eleanor stared at her, fascinated. "You sound like a remarkable woman." "I'm a free woman, Miss Hartley, which is the next best thing. And I suspect you understand that better than most." Beatrice's eyes were shrewd, but kind. "Sebastian told me what happened at the ball, how you defended the children. That took courage. It was nothing. It was everything. Those children have been drowning, and Sebastian has been too lost in his own grief to see it. But you saw it. You threw them a lifeline." Beatrice paused, then added carefully, "And I think you may have thrown Sebastian one too." Eleanor's heart skipped. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you? My dear, I've known Sebastian since he married my sister 15 years ago. I watched him fall in love with Catherine, watched him become a devoted husband and father, and I watched him die inside when she was killed. For 2 years, he's been a ghost. But his letters these past weeks, there's life in them again. Hope. And it started when you arrived." "I'm just the governess," Eleanor said weakly. Beatrice smiled. "If you say so. But I'll tell you this, Miss Hartley, in my house you're a guest, not a servant. You'll dine with the family, attend our gatherings, and be treated with the respect you deserve. I won't hear any arguments about propriety or station. Understood?" Eleanor nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. "Good. Now freshen up and come down for tea. I want to hear all about Yorkshire and my brother-in-law's dramatic stand against Lady Thornton. The gossip has already reached London, you know. Sebastian is being hailed as either a romantic hero or a madman, depending on who's telling the story." That evening, Eleanor joined the family for dinner in Beatrice's elegant dining room. It was a far cry from eating alone in the nursery at Ashford Manor. The conversation flowed easily, with Beatrice drawing out the children's interests and making them laugh with stories of London life. "Tomorrow, I thought we might visit the British Museum," Beatrice suggested. "Thomas, you'll love the Egyptian antiquities. And Kit, there's a new exhibition of natural history specimens that includes the most beautiful butterflies." "Could Miss Hartley come too?" Kit asked immediately. "Of course. I'm counting on Miss Hartley to keep me from getting lost. I have a terrible sense of direction." After dinner, while the children played with the cats in the drawing room, Beatrice invited Eleanor and Sebastian to her private study. It was a cosy room lined with books, with a fire crackling in the grate, and comfortable chairs arranged for conversation. "Sebastian, I want to talk to you about the children's social introduction," Beatrice began, pouring sherry for them all. "London society can be cruel, as you well know, but it can also be forgiving, especially if we're strategic." "What do you suggest?" Sebastian asked, accepting his glass. "Small gatherings first. I'll host a tea for some of my friends, women who are intelligent and kind, who have children of their own. Let Thomas and Kit meet other young people in a safe environment. Then perhaps some cultural outings, the theatre, concerts, exhibitions. Let society see them as they truly are, delightful, well-mannered children. And what about the gossip from Yorkshire? Sebastian's jaw tightened. Lady Thornton has undoubtedly spread her poison. Let her. Anyone who matters will see through it. And besides, you have a secret weapon. Beatrice's eyes twinkled as she looked at Eleanor. Miss Hartley here has transformed your children. That transformation will speak louder than any gossip. Eleanor felt the weight of their expectations and tried not to panic. I'm not sure I'm equipped for London society, Lady Beatrice. I'm just a country governess. You're a woman who stood up to the most powerful matron in Yorkshire and won, Beatrice countered. You'll do just fine. Besides, I'll be right there with you. We unconventional women must stick together. Over the following weeks, Beatrice's plan unfolded beautifully. She hosted a series of intimate gatherings, introducing the children to carefully selected families. Thomas made friends with the son of a prominent barrister, a boy his own age, who shared his love of history and strategy games. Kit charmed everyone with her artistic talent and her gentle way with animals. And Eleanor found herself drawn into Beatrice's world, a world of intelligent conversation, progressive ideas, and women who refused to be confined by society's expectations. She met writers and artists, educators and reformers. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was valued for her mind rather than merely tolerated for her usefulness. But it was her growing connection with Sebastian that both thrilled and terrified her. In London, away from the rigid hierarchy of Ashford Manor, the lines between employer and employee blurred. They took the children to museums and parks, attended concerts and exhibitions, always with Beatrice as chaperone, but often finding moments of private conversation. One afternoon at the British Museum, while the children explored the Greek antiquities with Beatrice, Sebastian and Eleanor found themselves alone in the manuscript room. Look at this, Sebastian said, pointing to an illuminated medieval text. The patience it must have taken to create something so beautiful. Each letter a work of art. Eleanor studied the delicate gold leaf and vibrant colors. It's extraordinary. All that effort for something most people would never see, never appreciate. But the artist knew its worth, Sebastian said softly. Sometimes the most valuable things are the ones hidden away, waiting for someone who can truly see them. He wasn't talking about the manuscript anymore. Eleanor knew it, felt it in the charged air between them. She turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Sebastian, we can't— I know, he said quietly. Believe me, I know. But Eleanor, I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend that you're just the governess, that what I feel for you is merely gratitude or respect. You've awakened something in me I thought died with Catherine. You've made me want to live again, not just exist. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. I feel it too, she whispered. But it's impossible. You're a duke, I'm a governess. Society would never accept it. Your children would suffer for it. Would they? Or would they see their father choosing happiness, choosing love, choosing to build a new life rather than remaining trapped in the past? It's not that simple, isn't it? He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Eleanor, I'm not asking you to decide anything now. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility, to not dismiss it out of hand because of what society says or expects. Before Eleanor could respond, they heard Kit's voice calling for them. The moment shattered, and they stepped apart, propriety reasserting itself. But as they rejoined the others, Eleanor's mind was reeling. Sebastian, the Duke of Ashford, had feelings for her, real feelings, and God help her, she felt the same way. But what possible future could they have? The scandal would be enormous. His family, his position, his children's prospects, all of it would be jeopardized. That night, Eleanor confided in Beatrice. They were in the drawing room after the children had gone to bed, Sebastian having retired to his study to attend to correspondence. "He told you he has feelings for you," Beatrice said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded miserably. "How did you know?" "My dear girl, I've been watching the two of you circle each other for weeks. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, the way you light up when he enters a room. It's rather beautiful, actually." "It's rather impossible," Eleanor corrected. "Lady Beatrice, I'm a vicar's daughter, with no fortune, no connections, no prospects. He's a duke. The scandal alone would destroy him. Would it? Or would it simply separate the true friends from the social climbers?" Beatrice leaned forward, her expression serious. "Eleanor, may I tell you something about my sister? Catherine was a wonderful woman, and Sebastian loved her deeply. But theirs was an arranged marriage, made for all the right reasons: family, fortune, social standing. They grew to love each other, yes, but it wasn't a grand passion. It was comfortable, suitable, appropriate." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What I see between you and Sebastian is different. It's a meeting of minds and hearts. It's two people who see each other truly and choose each other anyway. That's rare, Eleanor, precious, and I think it would be a tragedy to dismiss it simply because society says it's not appropriate. But the children adore you. They're happier than they've been in 2 years. Do you really think they would resent their father finding love again, especially with someone they already love?" Eleanor wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that love could conquer social barriers, that happiness was possible. But years of living on society's margins had taught her caution. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. Beatrice smiled gently. "Then don't do anything yet. Just be open to the possibility. Let this unfold naturally. And trust that sometimes the most unconventional choices lead to the greatest happiness." As Eleanor climbed the stairs to her room that night, she felt as if she was standing at a crossroads. One path led to safety, propriety, and loneliness. The other led to love, scandal, and the unknown. She didn't know which path she would choose, but for the first time in her life, she was beginning to believe that she had a choice at all. Spring arrived in London with a flourish of green leaves and blooming flowers, transforming the city's parks into gardens of colour and life. The Ashford household had settled into a comfortable rhythm, mornings devoted to the children's lessons, afternoons to cultural excursions and social calls, evenings to family dinners and quiet conversation. Eleanor had never been happier, and that happiness terrified her, because with each passing day, her feelings for Sebastian deepened, and his for her, if the lingering glances and stolen moments were any indication. They had not spoken again of what had passed between them at the British Museum, but the awareness hummed between them constantly, a melody only they could hear. It was Beatrice who forced the issue into the open. 6 weeks into their London stay, she announced at breakfast that she was hosting a spring salon, a grand evening of music, poetry, and intellectual discourse with guests from across London's artistic and social circles. "And before you protest, Eleanor," Beatrice said, fixing her with a firm look, "you will attend as a guest, not as staff. I've already had a dressmaker send over several gowns for you to choose from. No arguments." Eleanor's cheeks flushed. "Lady Beatrice, I couldn't possibly—" "You can and you will. Sebastian, tell her." Sebastian looked up from his newspaper, his dark eyes warm. "I think it's an excellent idea. You've been working tirelessly with the children, Eleanor. You deserve an evening of enjoyment. And besides," he added with a slight smile, "I'd very much like to see you in something other than Governess Grey." The intimacy in his tone made Eleanor's heart skip. Kit clapped her hands in delight. "Oh yes, Miss Hartley, you'll look so beautiful. Will you wear your hair down?" "Certainly not," Eleanor said, trying to regain her composure. "That would be entirely inappropriate." "A compromise, then," Beatrice suggested with a mischievous glint. "Up," but with a few curls framing your face. Trust me, my dear, it's time London saw you as you truly are." The days leading up to the salon passed in a blur of preparation. Beatrice's townhouse was transformed. Additional chairs brought in for the music room, the dining room prepared for an elaborate supper, flowers arranged in every room. The guest list was impressive: artists and writers, politicians and reformers, and yes, some of London's more progressive aristocratic families. On the evening of the salon, Eleanor stood in her room, staring at her reflection with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. The dressmaker had outdone herself. The gown was a deep sapphire blue silk that brought out the grey of Eleanor's eyes and complemented her fair complexion. The neckline was modest but elegant, the sleeves fitted, the skirt falling in graceful folds. Beatrice's lady's maid had dressed Eleanor's hair in an intricate arrangement of braids and curls, with small white flowers tucked among the dark strands. She looked like someone else entirely, not a governess, but a lady, someone who might belong in Sebastian's world. "You look like a princess," Kit breathed from the doorway. She and Thomas had been allowed to stay up for the early part of the evening, and both children were dressed in their finest. "Hardly that," Eleanor said, but she couldn't suppress her smile. "Father's going to faint when he sees you," Thomas added with the brutal honesty of a 10-year-old. Eleanor's stomach fluttered with nerves. "Don't be silly, now come along, both of you. We should go down before the guests arrive." But when Eleanor descended the stairs, it was she who nearly fainted. Sebastian stood in the entrance hall, dressed in formal evening attire that emphasized his height and bearing. His dark hair was swept back, his scarred face somehow more handsome in the candlelight. When he looked up and saw her, he went completely still. "Eleanor," he breathed, and the way he said her name with such wonder, such longing, made her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. "Your Grace," she managed, acutely aware of the servants bustling around them. He climbed the stairs to meet her, offering his arm. "You look extraordinary," he said quietly, for her ears alone, "like starlight made flesh." "You're being ridiculous," Eleanor whispered, but her cheeks were warm with pleasure. "I'm being honest. Eleanor, Guests are arriving," Beatrice called from below, and the moment was broken. The salon was unlike anything Eleanor had experienced. Beatrice's drawing room filled with fascinating people. A celebrated poet who read from his latest work, a violinist who played with such passion that several ladies wept, a female physician who spoke eloquently about the need for women's medical education. Eleanor found herself drawn into conversations about literature and philosophy, her opinions sought and valued. And through it all, she was aware of Sebastian watching her. Not possessively, but with pride and something deeper, a recognition of her worth, her intelligence, her right to be in this space. It was during the interval, when guests were moving to the dining room for supper, that Eleanor encountered the first hint of trouble. A woman approached her, Lady Ashworth, one of the Yorkshire families who had attended the disastrous Christmas ball. "Miss Hartley, isn't it?" Lady Ashworth's smile was sharp. "How unexpected to see you here. I understood you were the Ashford governess." "I am," Eleanor said evenly. "Lady Beatrice was kind enough to invite me to attend this evening." "How progressive of her. Though I must say, it's rather unusual for a governess to socialize with her employers. One might almost think you were forgetting your place." Before Eleanor could respond, Sebastian appeared at her side. "Miss Hartley's place is wherever she chooses it to be, Lady Ashworth. She's a valued member of our household and a guest in my sister-in-law's home. I trust that's clear." Lady Ashworth's eyes widened at the rebuke, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, Your Grace. I meant no offence. I was merely surprised. After all, the last time we saw you, you were defending your children against Lady Thornton's entirely reasonable concerns. One does wonder about your judgment. One might wonder about the judgment of anyone who considers public humiliation of children reasonable," Sebastian replied coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse us." He guided Eleanor away, his hand warm at the small of her back. "I apologize for her rudeness." "You don't need to defend me at every turn, Sebastian. People will talk." "Let them talk. I'm tired of living my life according to other people's expectations." He paused, then added quietly, "Eleanor, after the salon ends, would you meet me in the library? There's something I need to discuss with you." Her heart raced. "Sebastian, I don't think—" "Please, it's important." She nodded, unable to refuse him anything when he looked at her like that. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Eleanor smiled and conversed, but her mind was on the coming meeting. What did Sebastian want to discuss? Was he going to declare himself formally, ask her to leave? She couldn't bear the uncertainty. Finally, near midnight, the last guests departed. Beatrice retired with the children, and Eleanor made her way to the library. Sebastian was already there, standing by the window, his profile illuminated by moonlight. "You came," he said, turning to face her. "You asked me to." He crossed the room to stand before her, close enough that she could see the pulse beating at his throat, the intensity in his dark eyes. "Eleanor, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that you're just the governess, that what I feel for you is appropriate or manageable. I'm in love with you, completely, irrevocably in love with you." Eleanor's breath caught. To hear the words spoken aloud, so plainly and passionately, was overwhelming. "Sebastian, I know all the reasons why this is impossible. I know the scandal it would cause, the difficulties we would face. But I also know that I haven't felt truly alive since Catherine died, not until you walked into Ashford Manor and reminded me what it means to hope, to feel, to love." He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility of a future together, as my wife." Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes. "You're asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to think about it, to imagine what our life could be, you, me, the children, building something new together. I know it won't be easy. Society will be cruel, at least at first. But Eleanor, I believe we could be happy, truly happy, and I think the children would be overjoyed." "They would," Eleanor admitted, her voice breaking. "Sebastian, I love you too. I've tried not to, tried to be sensible and practical, but I can't help it. You've become everything to me." "Then say yes," he urged, his thumbs stroking her palms. "Say you'll at least consider it." "I will," she whispered. "I'll consider it. But Sebastian, you need to understand. If we do this, if we marry, I won't be a duchess who hides in the country. I won't apologize for who I am or where I came from. I'll stand beside you as an equal or not at all." His smile was radiant. "I wouldn't want it any other way. Eleanor Hartley, you are the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. You don't need a title to be extraordinary. You already are." He leaned forward, and for one breathless moment, Eleanor thought he might kiss her. But propriety held. Barely. And instead he pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture of tenderness and promise. "Think about it," he murmured against her skin. "And know that whatever you decide, you've already given me more than I thought possible. You've given me hope." Eleanor left the library in a daze, her heart singing and her mind racing. Sebastian loved her, wanted to marry her. It was everything she'd dreamed of and everything she'd feared. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The very next morning, as the household was breakfasting, a visitor was announced, one that made Sebastian's face go pale. "Lady Thornton is here?" he repeated to the butler. "From Yorkshire?" "Yes, Your Grace. She's in the drawing room and insists on speaking with you immediately. She says it's a matter of utmost urgency regarding your family's reputation." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Lady Thornton, the woman Sebastian had publicly humiliated and expelled from his home, had followed them to London. This could only mean trouble. Sebastian rose, his jaw tight. "I'll see her. Beatrice, would you join me? Eleanor, please keep the children upstairs." But Eleanor could hear raised voices from the drawing room as she ushered Thomas and Kit to the schoolroom. Lady Thornton's shrill tones carried through the house. Absolutely disgraceful. The entire county is talking about it. A duke consorting with his governess, treating her as an equal. It's unseemly, Your Grace, and it reflects poorly on your children. My relationship with Miss Hartley is none of your concern. Sebastian's voice was cold as ice. It's everyone's concern when a man of your position makes a spectacle of himself. And now I hear you were seen together at Lady Beatrice's salon, looking at each other like... Lady Thornton sputtered with indignation. Your Grace, I've come as a friend to warn you. If you continue down this path, if you actually consider marrying this woman, you'll be ostracized. Your children will be ostracized. Is that what you want? There was a long silence. Then Beatrice's voice, sharp and clear. Lady Thornton, I think you've said quite enough. My brother-in-law's personal life is his own affair, and frankly, I find your concern suspiciously convenient, given that you have 3 unmarried daughters and have been angling for a ducal match for years. How dare you? Lady Thornton gasped. I came here out of genuine concern. You came here to intimidate and manipulate. Beatrice cut her off. And it won't work. Now, I believe Sebastian asked you to leave his home once before. Allow me to extend the same courtesy. Get out of my house. Eleanor heard the sounds of Lady Thornton's furious departure, the slam of the front door. She waited, her heart pounding, wondering what would happen next. It was Thomas who broke the tension. Miss Hartley, is father going to marry you? Eleanor turned to find both children staring at her with wide eyes. There was no point in lying. He's asked me to consider it. But Thomas, Kit, you need to understand. If we did marry, it would cause a scandal. People would say unkind things. It might affect your prospects, your place in society. I don't care about society, Kit said fiercely. I care about father being happy. And you make him happy. You make all of us happy. We want you to be our mother, Thomas added, his young face serious. Our real mother is gone, and we'll always love her. But you're here, and you love us, and we love you. Isn't that what matters? Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. Oh, my darlings, you have no idea how much that means to me. Then say yes, Kit urged. Please say yes. Before Eleanor could respond, Sebastian appeared in the doorway. His face was drawn, but when he saw her with the children, something softened in his expression. May I speak with Miss Hartley alone? He asked gently. The children reluctantly left, and Sebastian closed the door behind them. You heard Lady Thornton. Most of the house heard Lady Thornton. He smiled slightly at that, but it faded quickly. She's right about one thing. If we marry, there will be scandal. The gossip has already started, apparently. People are watching us, judging us, and it will get worse before it gets better. I know. But Eleanor, I also know this. I don't care. I've spent 2 years living in the shadows, afraid to feel, afraid to hope. You brought me back to life. You gave me back my children. And I'll be damned if I let people like Lady Thornton dictate my happiness. He crossed to her, taking her hands. So I'm asking you again, more formally this time, Eleanor Hartley, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Eleanor looked into his eyes, those dark, wounded, hopeful eyes, and knew there was only one answer she could give. The answer her heart had known from the moment he'd first smiled at his children, from the moment he'd defended them at the ball, from the moment he'd looked at her and seen not a governess, but a woman worthy of love. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Sebastian, I'll marry you. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Eleanor felt the rightness of it in her bones. This was where she belonged. Not as a governess, not as an outsider, but as a partner, a mother, a wife. We'll face the scandal together, Sebastian murmured into her hair. We'll weather the gossip and the judgment, and we'll build a life based on love and truth, not on what society expects. Together, Eleanor agreed, her arms tight around him. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, gathering strength for the battles ahead, because they both knew that Lady Thornton's visit was just the beginning. The real test would come when they announced their engagement publicly, when London society had to decide whether to accept or reject the Duke who had chosen love over propriety. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that, Eleanor thought, was enough to face anything. When they finally emerged from the schoolroom, they found Beatrice waiting in the hallway, a knowing smile on her face. "I take it congratulations are in order." "We're engaged," Sebastian confirmed, his arm around Eleanor's waist. Beatrice embraced them both. "I'm so happy for you. And don't worry about Lady Thornton or anyone like her. We'll handle this strategically. A proper announcement, a respectable engagement period, and by the time you marry, society will have moved on to the next scandal. Or they'll have ostracized us completely," Eleanor said wryly. "Then we'll be ostracized together," Beatrice replied firmly. "You're family now, Eleanor, and the Thornhills and Ashfords don't abandon family." That evening they told the children officially. Thomas and Kit's joy was unrestrained. They cheered and hugged Eleanor and declared it the best news ever. For the first time since their mother's death, they looked like children again, unburdened by grief and uncertainty. As Eleanor tucked Kit into bed that night, the little girl looked up at her with shining eyes. "Will we call you Mama now?" Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. "If you'd like to, but there's no rush. We can take our time figuring out what feels right." "I'd like to," Kit said softly. "Is that okay? I mean, I still love my first mama, but I love you too." "That's more than okay, sweetheart. Love doesn't run out. There's always room for more." Eleanor kissed her forehead. "Sleep now. Tomorrow is a new beginning for all of us." As she left Kit's room, Eleanor found Sebastian waiting in the hallway. Without a word, he took her hand and led her to the library, where a fire burned low in the grate. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and beautiful. "It was my grandmother's," Sebastian explained as he slipped it onto Eleanor's finger. "She was a remarkable woman, intelligent, independent, ahead of her time. She would have liked you very much." Eleanor stared at the ring, at the way it caught the firelight, at the symbol of promise and commitment it represented. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful, inside and out." Sebastian cupped her face in his hands. "Eleanor, I know the road ahead won't be easy, but I promise you this. I will stand beside you through every challenge. I will defend you against every slight. And I will love you for the rest of my life." "And I will love you," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Through scandal and gossip, through judgment and difficulty, we'll face it all together." This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, propriety be damned, Eleanor didn't pull away. She kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and determination into that kiss. It was a promise and a declaration, a beginning and a homecoming all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered, "for taking a chance on a broken man and his wild children." "You were never broken," Eleanor corrected gently, "just wounded. And wounds can heal, with time and love and patience." "Then let's heal together," Sebastian said. "Let's build something beautiful from the broken pieces." And standing there in the firelight, with the ring on her finger and love in her heart, Eleanor believed they could do exactly that. The resurgence had begun. The Duke of Ashford had chosen love over propriety, and his governess had chosen courage over safety. Together they would face whatever came next, the rivalry, the scandal, the judgment of society. But they would face it as partners, as equals, as two people who had found in each other something worth fighting for. And that, Eleanor thought as Sebastian kissed her once more, was worth any scandal society could devise. The announcement of the Duke of Ashford's engagement to his children's governess sent shockwaves through London society. The news appeared in the Times on a crisp April morning, stated with dignified simplicity, "His Grace the Duke of Ashford is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Eleanor Hartley of Derbyshire." The wedding will take place in June at St. George's, Hanover Square. Duh! The reaction was immediate and divided. Progressive circles, Beatrice's friends, the intellectuals and reformers, celebrated it as a romantic triumph of love over convention. But the old guard, the arbiters of propriety and tradition, were scandalized. A duke marrying a governess? It was unprecedented, unseemly, a betrayal of everything the aristocracy stood for. Eleanor woke the morning after the announcement to find Beatrice at her bedroom door, holding a stack of calling cards and invitations. "Well," Beatrice said with a wry smile, "we're either social pariahs or the most fascinating people in London. Possibly both. Half of these are invitations to events where people want to gawk at you. The other half are from families withdrawing their previous invitations." Eleanor's stomach churned. "Perhaps we should have waited, been more discreet." "Absolutely not. You and Sebastian have nothing to be ashamed of. Love is love, regardless of social station." Beatrice sat on the edge of the bed. "But I won't lie to you, Eleanor. The next few weeks will be difficult. There will be cut direct on the street, whispers behind fans, articles in the scandal sheets. Are you prepared for that?" Eleanor thought of Sebastian's face when she'd said yes, of Thomas and Kit's joy, of the life they could build together. "I am. I didn't come this far to retreat at the first sign of difficulty." "That's my girl." Beatrice squeezed her hand. "Now get dressed. We have a busy day ahead. If society wants to judge us, let's give them something worth judging." The first test came that very afternoon. Beatrice had arranged for them to attend a charity exhibition at the Royal Academy, a public event where London's elite would gather. Eleanor dressed carefully in a day dress of pale green muslin, her engagement ring visible on her finger, her head held high. Sebastian met them in the entrance hall, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark blue coat. His eyes softened when he saw Eleanor. "Ready to face the lions?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The children were staying home with their tutor, spared the spectacle for now. As the carriage rolled through London streets, Sebastian took Eleanor's hand. "Whatever happens today, remember this. You are my choice, my partner, my equal. Anyone who treats you with disrespect is disrespecting me, and I won't tolerate it." The Royal Academy was crowded with London's fashionable set, all ostensibly there to view the latest paintings, but really there to see and be seen. When the Duke of Ashford entered with his fiancée and sister-in-law, a hush fell over the room. Eleanor felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her dress, her bearing, her worthiness to stand beside a duke. She lifted her chin and smiled, refusing to be cowed. The first hour was a study in social warfare. Some guests approached to offer congratulations, their curiosity barely concealed. Others turned away pointedly, delivering the cut direct with practiced precision. Eleanor felt each snub like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure, discussing the artwork with intelligence and grace. It was in the portrait gallery that they encountered Lady Thornton and her daughters. The woman's face twisted with vindictive satisfaction when she saw them. "Your Grace," she said with exaggerated courtesy. "And Miss Hartley, or should I say, the future Duchess. How remarkable. I do hope you're prepared for the responsibilities of such a position. It requires breeding, education, and social graces that can't simply be acquired overnight." "Then it's fortunate that Miss Hartley possesses all three naturally," Sebastian replied coldly. "Unlike some who were born to privilege but lack basic kindness and decency." Lady Thornton's eldest daughter, Arabella, stepped forward. She was a beautiful girl of perhaps 20, with golden hair and cold blue eyes. "Father says you've made yourself a laughingstock, Your Grace. That you've thrown away your dignity for a woman who was literally in your employ. How can you expect society to accept such a mésalliance?" "I don't expect anything from society," Sebastian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I expect respect for the woman I love, and if society can't provide that, then society can go to hell." The gasps were audible. A duke did not use such language in public, did not openly defy social convention. But Sebastian seemed beyond caring. He offered his arm to Eleanor. "Come, my dear, the air in here has become rather stifling." As they walked away, Eleanor heard Arabella's spiteful whisper, "She'll never truly be one of us. She'll always be the governess who got above herself." Eleanor's steps faltered, but Sebastian's hand tightened on hers. "Don't listen to her. She's jealous because she knows you have something she never will, genuine love and respect." They found refuge in a quieter gallery where Beatrice had strategically positioned herself with a group of her progressive friends. These women, writers, artists, educators, welcomed Eleanor warmly, engaging her in conversation about literature and social reform. For a blessed half-hour, Eleanor felt like herself again, valued for her mind rather than judged for her origins. But the respite was short-lived. As they prepared to leave, they encountered someone unexpected, Lord Pemberton, the son of Eleanor's previous employer. He was a man of perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "Miss Hartley," he said, approaching with a warm smile, "I heard the news of your engagement. Please accept my congratulations. My mother always spoke so highly of you. She would have been delighted to see you so happy." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at the genuine kindness. "Thank you, Lord Pemberton. That means more than you know." He turned to Sebastian. "Your Grace, I hope you know what a treasure you've found. Miss Hartley was more than a governess to our family. She was a friend, a confidant, a woman of remarkable intelligence and compassion. You're a fortunate man." "I know it," Sebastian replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for saying so." As Lord Pemberton departed, Eleanor realized something important. Not everyone would judge them. There would be allies, supporters, people who saw beyond social convention to the truth of their love. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be possible. The following weeks brought a mixture of triumphs and trials. Some families embraced them, particularly those with progressive leanings or their own unconventional histories. Others remained coldly disapproving. The scandal sheets had a field day, publishing cartoons and satirical articles about the Duke and the governess. But through it all, Sebastian remained steadfast. He took Eleanor to the theatre, to concerts, to dinners with his political allies. He introduced her to his friends and colleagues, making it clear that she was to be treated with respect. And slowly, grudgingly, society began to accept the inevitable. The turning point came at a dinner hosted by the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire, one of the most influential couples in England. The invitation had been unexpected, a test, Eleanor suspected, to see if they were worthy of acceptance by the highest echelons of society. Eleanor dressed with particular care that evening, in a gown of deep burgundy silk that Beatrice had insisted she commission. Her hair was arranged in an elegant style, the sapphire engagement ring gleaming on her finger. She looked every inch a duchess, even if she didn't yet bear the title. The Devonshire townhouse was magnificent, and the dinner party included cabinet ministers, foreign ambassadors, and the cream of London society. Eleanor found herself seated between a prominent barrister and a celebrated historian, both of whom engaged her in stimulating conversation. She held her own, discussing everything from legal reform to the latest archaeological discoveries in Egypt. Across the table, she caught Sebastian watching her with undisguised pride. He was deep in conversation with the Duke of Devonshire about estate management, but his eyes kept returning to her as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. After dinner, as the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, the Duchess of Devonshire approached Eleanor. She was a formidable woman in her 50s, known for her intelligence and political influence. "Miss Hartley, I wanted to speak with you privately," the Duchess said, guiding Eleanor to a quiet corner. "I've been watching you this evening, and I must say I'm impressed. You carry yourself with grace and dignity, you're clearly well educated, and you don't seem intimidated by your circumstances." "Thank you, Your Grace," Eleanor said carefully, unsure where this was leading. "I'll be frank with you. When I heard about your engagement, I was skeptical. A governess marrying a duke. It seemed like a recipe for disaster. But having met you, I understand Sebastian's choice. You're not some opportunistic social climber. You're a woman of substance who happens to have captured the heart of a good man. The Duchess paused, her expression serious. Society will test you, Miss Hartley. They'll watch for any misstep, any sign that you're not worthy of your position. But if you remain true to yourself, if you continue to demonstrate the intelligence and character you've shown tonight, you'll win them over. It may take time, but you'll do it. Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude. Your support means everything, Your Grace. I know I have much to learn about being a duchess, but I'm willing to work for it. That's exactly the right attitude. And please, call me Georgiana when we're private. I have a feeling we're going to be friends. The Duchess smiled warmly. Now, let me introduce you to some of the other ladies. It's time we started building your social network. The evening ended on a note of triumph. As they rode home in the carriage, Sebastian pulled Eleanor close. You were magnificent tonight, he murmured. The Duchess of Devonshire doesn't give her approval lightly. You've won a powerful ally. We've won an ally, Eleanor corrected. This isn't just my battle, Sebastian. It's ours. Ours, he agreed, kissing her temple. Always ours. But their happiness was tempered by one final confrontation. 2 weeks before the wedding, as Eleanor was walking in Hyde Park with the children, they encountered Arabella Thornton. The young woman was alone, and there was something desperate in her expression. Miss Hartley, Arabella called out. Might I speak with you? Privately. Eleanor hesitated, then asked Thomas and Kit to wait on a nearby bench. She approached Arabella warily. What do you want, Miss Thornton? Arabella's composure cracked. I want to understand. How did you do it? How did you make a duke fall in love with you? I've been trying for years. I'm beautiful, well-bred, accomplished in all the proper ways. But he never looked at me the way he looks at you. Eleanor felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. I didn't try to make him fall in love with me, Miss Thornton. I simply saw him, not the duke, not the title, but the man, the grieving father, the wounded soul trying to find his way back to life. I saw his children's pain and tried to help. Love grew from that understanding, that genuine connection. But you're nobody, Arabella said, and there was more confusion than cruelty in her voice. You have no fortune, no family connections. How is that fair? It's not about fairness, Eleanor said gently. It's about compatibility, about two people who see each other truly and choose each other anyway. Miss Thornton, you're young and beautiful and accomplished. But if you're only seeking a title rather than a partner, you'll never find real happiness. Look for someone who values you for who you are, not what you represent. Arabella stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Eleanor watched her go, feeling the weight of the younger woman's disillusionment. Society had taught Arabella that her worth lay in her ability to secure an advantageous marriage, and now that formula had failed her. It was a cruel system, one that damaged everyone it touched. Was that lady mean to you? Kit asked when Eleanor returned to the children. No, sweetheart. She was just sad and confused. Sometimes people lash out when they're hurting. Like we used to, Thomas said quietly, before you came. Eleanor hugged them both. Exactly like that. And look how far you've come. People can change, can heal, if they're given the chance and the support. The final week before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations. Eleanor's father and siblings arrived from Derbyshire, overwhelmed by the grandeur of it all, but fiercely proud. Her father, a simple country vicar, took Sebastian aside for a private conversation. Your Grace, Reverend Hartley said, his weathered face serious, my daughter is the finest woman I know. She's intelligent, compassionate, and strong. But she's also been hurt by society's judgments, by always being on the outside looking in. If you marry her, you must promise to protect her, to value her, to never let her feel less than she is. Sebastian met the older man's eyes steadily. Sir, I promise you this. I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of your daughter. She's given me back my life, my children, my hope. I love her more than I can express, and I will defend her against anyone who tries to diminish her." Reverend Hartley studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Then you have my blessing, Your Grace, and my gratitude for seeing what others were too blind to see." The night before the wedding, Eleanor stood in her room at Beatrice's townhouse, staring at her wedding gown. It was a creation of ivory silk and Brussels lace, elegant and beautiful without being ostentatious. Tomorrow she would wear it and become a duchess. Tomorrow her life would change forever. There was a soft knock at the door, and Beatrice entered, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought you might need this," she said, handing one to Eleanor. "And some company." They sat together by the window, looking out at the London night. "Are you frightened?" Beatrice asked gently. "Terrified," Eleanor admitted. "Not of marrying Sebastian. I've never been more certain of anything, but of everything that comes after. Of being a duchess, of navigating society, of potentially failing him and the children. You won't fail them. You couldn't if you tried." Beatrice took her hand. "Eleanor, I've watched you these past months. You've faced every challenge with grace and courage. You've won over skeptics, silenced critics, and proven that worth has nothing to do with birth. Tomorrow, when you walk down that aisle, you'll be walking toward the life you've earned, the love you deserve." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For everything, for believing in me, for supporting us, for being the family I never knew I needed." "That's what family does," Beatrice said simply. "And you are family now, Eleanor. You always will be." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 unconventional women who had refused to let society define them, who had chosen their own paths and found happiness in the choosing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new judgments, new battles to fight. But tonight Eleanor allowed herself to simply feel grateful for Sebastian's love, for the children's acceptance, for Beatrice's friendship, for the chance to build a life based on truth and courage rather than convention and fear. She had been a governess, an outsider, a woman with no prospects. But she had also been brave enough to love, strong enough to fight, and wise enough to know that some things, love, family, integrity, were worth any scandal society could devise. Tomorrow she would become a duchess. But more importantly, she would become a wife, a mother, a partner in building something beautiful from broken pieces. And that, Eleanor thought as she finally climbed into bed, was the greatest triumph of all. The wedding of the Duke of Ashford to Miss Eleanor Hartley took place on a perfect June morning, with sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of St. George's, Hanover Square, painting the ancient stones in jewels of colour. The church was filled to capacity, some guests there out of genuine affection, others out of curiosity, all of them witnesses to what would become one of the most talked-about marriages of the decade. Eleanor stood in the vestibule, her hand trembling slightly on her father's arm. Through the open doors she could see the assembled crowd, the flowers adorning every pew, and at the altar, Sebastian, tall and handsome in his formal attire, his scarred face turned toward her with such love that it took her breath away. "Ready, my dear?" her father asked softly. Eleanor thought of the journey that had brought her here, from a vicar's daughter with no prospects to a woman about to become a duchess. She thought of the children waiting in the front pew, their faces shining with excitement. She thought of Beatrice, her staunchest ally, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and she thought of Sebastian, the wounded man who had learned to love again, who had chosen her above all others. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it with every fibre of her being. The organ swelled with the opening notes of Handel, and Eleanor began her walk down the aisle. She was aware of the whispers, the turned heads, the assessment in countless eyes. But she kept her gaze fixed on Sebastian, and in his eyes she saw only love, pride, and promise. When she reached the altar, he took her hand, and she felt the tremor in his fingers. He was as nervous and overwhelmed as she was. The realization made her smile, and his answering smile was radiant. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Eleanor's father performed the service, his voice steady and warm as he spoke of love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. When it came time for the vows, Sebastian's voice rang out clear and strong. I, Sebastian Edward Ashford, take thee, Eleanor Rose Hartley, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Eleanor repeated her own vows, her voice unwavering despite the tears streaming down her face. And when Sebastian slipped the wedding band onto her finger, a circle of gold engraved with words only they could see, Amor vincit omnia, love conquers all, she felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. I now pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Hartley declared. You may kiss your bride. Sebastian cupped Eleanor's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears, and kissed her with such tenderness and passion that the church erupted in applause. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, Eleanor saw Thomas and Kit cheering from the front pew, and her heart overflowed with joy. They were a family now, officially, irrevocably, beautifully a family. The wedding breakfast at Beatrice's townhouse was a lavish affair, with champagne flowing and toasts offered by friends and family. The Duke of Devonshire raised his glass and spoke eloquently about love transcending social boundaries. Beatrice told embarrassing stories about Sebastian's youth that had everyone laughing, and Eleanor's eldest brother, usually shy and reserved, stood and said simply, "My sister has always been extraordinary. I'm glad the Duke of Ashford was wise enough to see it." But it was Thomas who brought tears to everyone's eyes. The 10-year-old stood, his young face serious, and cleared his throat. "When our mother died, Kit and I thought we'd never be happy again. We thought Father would stay sad forever, and we'd always feel broken. But then Miss Eleanor, came to Ashford Manor. She didn't try to replace our mother. She just loved us exactly as we were. She taught us that broken things can be mended, that grief doesn't last forever, and that it's okay to be happy again." His voice cracked slightly. "She gave us back our father, and now she's given us a new mother. So I want to say thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for saving our family." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Eleanor crossed to Thomas and pulled him into a fierce embrace, Kit joining them immediately. Sebastian wrapped his arms around all three of them, and for a long moment they simply held each other, a family forged not by blood alone, but by choice, love, and the courage to heal. After the breakfast, as tradition dictated, Sebastian and Eleanor departed for their honeymoon. They had chosen to spend 2 weeks in the Lake District, a place of wild beauty and tranquility, far from London's prying eyes and society's judgments. The cottage Sebastian had rented was charming and private, nestled beside a crystalline lake, with mountains rising in the distance. For the first time in months, they were truly alone, with no servants, no social obligations, no one to judge or assess them. On their first evening, they sat on the cottage porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Sebastian had his arm around Eleanor, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling utterly content. "Do you have any regrets?" Sebastian asked quietly. "About the scandal, the gossip, the difficulties?" Eleanor considered the question seriously. "I regret that it was necessary, that society made our love something to be ashamed of rather than celebrated. But do I regret choosing you, choosing this life? Never, not for a single moment." "I don't deserve you," Sebastian murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You deserve happiness, Sebastian, we both do. And we've fought hard enough for it that I think we've earned the right to simply enjoy it now." They spent their honeymoon in blissful simplicity, walking through the countryside, reading by the fire, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Sebastian told her stories of his childhood, his years at Cambridge, his early marriage to Catherine. He spoke of his late wife with affection and sadness, but without the crushing grief that had once consumed him. "I loved Catherine," he said one evening as they lay in bed, Eleanor's head on his chest. But ours was a different kind of love. Comfortable, expected, appropriate. What I feel for you is something else entirely. It's passionate and challenging and utterly consuming. You make me want to be better, to do better, to live fully rather than simply exist. You do the same for me, Eleanor replied. You've given me a place to belong, a family to love, a purpose beyond mere survival. You've made me believe that I'm worthy of happiness, of love, of all the things I thought were reserved for other people. You were always worthy, Eleanor. The world was just too blind to see it. They returned to London at the end of June, tanned and relaxed and deeply in love. The scandal had died down somewhat in their absence. Society had moved on to newer gossip, and the Duke and Duchess of Ashford were becoming old news. But Eleanor knew the real test would come in the autumn, when Parliament reconvened and the social season began in earnest. They spent the summer at Ashford Manor, and Eleanor marvelled at how different the house felt now. The oppressive grief had lifted, replaced by light and laughter. The gardens were being restored, the rooms aired and redecorated. The children thrived, growing taller and more confident with each passing week. Eleanor established new routines: morning lessons with the children, afternoons managing the household, evenings with Sebastian, discussing estate business and local affairs. She discovered she had a talent for administration, for seeing inefficiencies and proposing solutions. Sebastian began consulting her on everything from tenant relations to investment strategies, valuing her intelligence and fresh perspective. "You're a natural duchess," he told her one evening as they reviewed the estate accounts together. "You've taken to this role as if you were born to it." "I was born to work hard and think clearly," Eleanor replied with a smile. "The title is just window dressing." But she was learning that the title carried weight and responsibility. As the Duchess of Ashford, her actions reflected on the entire family. She took her duties seriously, visiting tenants, supporting local charities, hosting gatherings for the county families. Slowly, grudgingly, even the most skeptical neighbours began to accept her. The turning point came in September, when Eleanor organised a harvest festival for the estate workers and their families. It was an old tradition that had lapsed during Sebastian's years of grief, and its revival was greeted with enthusiasm. Eleanor spent weeks planning every detail: games for the children, music and dancing, abundant food and drink. On the day of the festival, the manor grounds were transformed into a scene of joyful celebration. Eleanor moved through the crowd, speaking with everyone from the head gardener to the youngest scullery maid, remembering names and asking after families. She danced with tenant farmers, admired children's drawings, and judged the pie-baking contest with solemn attention. Sebastian watched her with undisguised admiration. "You're remarkable," he said when she finally returned to his side, flushed and happy. "Look at them. They adore you." "They adore feeling valued and appreciated," Eleanor corrected. "I'm just giving them what they deserve, respect and recognition." But it was more than that, and they both knew it. Eleanor had brought warmth and humanity back to Ashford Manor. She had reminded everyone, from the Duke himself to the lowest servant, that titles and positions mattered less than kindness and genuine connection. That evening, as the festival wound down and the last guests departed, Eleanor stood with Sebastian on the terrace, looking out over the estate. Thomas and Kit were asleep inside, exhausted from the day's excitement. The house glowed with lamplight, welcoming and warm. "Do you remember the first time you saw this place?" Sebastian asked, his arm around her waist. "I remember thinking it looked like a fortress built to keep the world at bay," Eleanor said. "Dark and imposing and utterly intimidating. And now? Now it looks like home." Sebastian turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Eleanor, I need you to know something. When I asked you to marry me, I knew I was asking you to take on an enormous burden. The title, the responsibilities, the scrutiny. But you've exceeded every expectation. You haven't just become a duchess. You've become the heart of this family, the soul of this estate. You've made Ashford Manor a home again." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "We did it together, Sebastian. You let me in, let me help, let me be a partner rather than just an ornament. That's what made the difference." "Then let's keep doing it together," he said, pulling her close, "for the rest of our lives." The autumn brought them back to London for the social season, and Eleanor faced it with newfound confidence. She had proven herself at Ashford Manor. Now she would prove herself in society's most demanding arena. The Duchess of Devonshire became her mentor and friend, introducing Eleanor to influential women and guiding her through the intricacies of aristocratic social life. Eleanor attended charity galas and political dinners, hosted her own gatherings, and gradually built a reputation as an intelligent, compassionate, and effective duchess. There were still those who whispered behind their fans who would never fully accept the governess-turned-duchess, but their numbers dwindled as Eleanor's grace and capability became undeniable. And those who had initially judged her most harshly often became her most ardent supporters once they actually met her. Lady Ashworth, who had been so cutting at Beatrice's salon, approached Eleanor at a Christmas ball with an expression of chagrin. "Your Grace, I owe you an apology," she said stiffly. "I judged you unfairly, based on prejudice rather than character. Having observed you these past months, I see that the Duke made an excellent choice. You're a credit to your position." "Thank you, Lady Ashworth," Eleanor replied graciously. "I appreciate your honesty, and I hope we can move forward as friends rather than adversaries." It was a small victory, but it represented something larger. The slow shift in society's perception, the grudging acknowledgement that perhaps love and character mattered more than birth and fortune. But the most satisfying moment came in the new year, when Eleanor received a letter from an unexpected source. It was from Arabella Thornton, written in a careful hand. "Dear Duchess of Ashford, I hope you will forgive the presumption of this letter. I have been thinking a great deal about our conversation in Hyde Park, and I wanted you to know that your words affected me profoundly. You were right. I had been seeking a title rather than a partner, measuring my worth by society's standards rather than my own. It was a hollow pursuit that brought me no happiness. I have since met someone, a younger son with no title and modest prospects, but with kindness and intelligence and a genuine appreciation for who I am rather than what I represent. My mother is horrified, of course, but I find I no longer care what she thinks. Thank you for showing me that there is another way to live, another measure of success. You have been braver than I could ever be, and I admire you for it. With sincere regards, Arabella Thornton." Eleanor showed the letter to Sebastian, who read it with a thoughtful expression. "You've started a revolution," he said with a slight smile. "One heart at a time. Hardly a revolution, just a reminder that we all have choices, even when society tells us we don't." Spring returned to London, bringing with it a special joy. Eleanor discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled the household with excitement. Thomas and Kit were thrilled at the prospect of a baby brother or sister, already planning how they would teach the infant everything they knew. "Will the baby call us brother and sister?" Kit asked one evening as Eleanor tucked her into bed. "Of course, darling. You'll be the baby's big sister, and Thomas will be the big brother. You're all my children, equally loved. Even though Thomas and I came first, and we had a different mother," Eleanor smoothed Kit's golden curls. "Love doesn't work like that, sweetheart. It doesn't divide or diminish, it multiplies. I love you and Thomas with my whole heart, and I'll love this new baby with my whole heart too. There's always enough love to go around." Kit snuggled into her pillow, content. "I'm glad you married father. I'm glad you're our mother now. I'm glad too, my darling. So very glad." The baby, a healthy boy they named Edward, after Sebastian's father, was born in November amid great celebration. Eleanor held her son for the first time and marveled at the miracle of it, this tiny, perfect life that she and Sebastian had created together. Sebastian sat beside her bed, his arm around her shoulders, both of them gazing at their son with wonder. "He's beautiful," Sebastian whispered, "like his mother." "He has your eyes," Eleanor observed, "and your stubborn chin, I suspect." Thomas and Kit were allowed in to meet their new brother, and their gentleness with the infant brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. They had come so far, these wounded children who had once been labelled troubled and wild. Now they were confident, loving, secure in their place in the world. As winter settled over London and the family gathered around the fire in Beatrice's drawing room, Sebastian with baby Edward in his arms, Thomas reading aloud from a book of adventures, Kit sketching the scene, Beatrice knitting and offering commentary, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace. She thought back to that cold November morning 2 years ago when she had arrived at Ashford Manor with nothing but a worn carpetbag and desperate hope. She had been hired to tame wild children, never expecting to tame a wounded heart or to have her own heart tamed in return. The journey had been difficult, marked by scandal and judgment, by battles fought and won. But it had also been beautiful, filled with love and growth and the discovery that family could be chosen as well as born. That home was not a place, but a feeling. That happiness was not reserved for the privileged few, but available to anyone brave enough to reach for it. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked softly, catching her reflective expression. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," Eleanor replied. "About how broken we all were, and how we healed each other." "You healed us," Sebastian corrected. "You walked into our lives and refused to give up on us, even when we'd given up on ourselves." "We healed each other," Eleanor insisted. "That's what love does, Sebastian. It doesn't fix everything magically, but it gives us the strength to fix ourselves together." He leaned over to kiss her, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby in his arms. "I love you, Eleanor Ashford, my Duchess, my partner, my heart." "And I love you," Eleanor replied, "my Duke, my friend, my home." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing London in white. But inside, the fire burned warm, and the family gathered close, and Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had been a governess, an outsider, a woman society deemed unworthy, but she had also been brave and kind and true to herself. And in the end, those qualities had mattered more than birth or fortune or any of the arbitrary measures by which society judged worth. She had bloomed where she was planted, transforming a house of grief into a home of love. She had tamed wild children, not through discipline, but through understanding. And she had tamed a wounded heart, not through design, but through genuine connection and courage. The scandal that had once threatened to destroy them had faded into memory, replaced by respect and admiration. The Duke and Duchess of Ashford were now known not for their unconventional marriage, but for their partnership, their philanthropy, their genuine love for each other, and their community. Years later, when Eleanor was an old woman surrounded by children and grandchildren, she would look back on her life and smile. She would remember the fear and the courage, the judgment and the triumph, the scandal and the love, and she would know that every difficult moment had been worth it because it had led her here, to a life rich with meaning, to a family bound by choice and love, to a happiness that had once seemed impossible but had become her everyday reality. She had been hired to tame the Duke's wild children. Instead, she had found her own wild heart, and in doing so, had discovered that the greatest adventure of all was not in taming, but in loving, fiercely, bravely, and without apology. And they all lived, if not without challenges, then with the courage to face them together, which, Eleanor had learned, was the truest definition of happily ever after. If you enjoyed this story of love, courage and second chances, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more emotional historical dramas, and share in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Was it Eleanor's brave defense of the children at the Christmas ball, Sebastian's public declaration of love, or perhaps the beautiful family they built together? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next story.